Okay, so now we're threaded up, we're ready to go, we know what all of these functions do. Before you start to sew every time, I want you to take a minute, just like when you get in the car and you check your mirrors and all of that. You're gonna do that here. You're always gonna check, am I on the stitch I wanna be on? Is my needle position or width where I want it to be? Is my length where I want it to be? And is my needle in its highest position with threads coming out? If all of those things are a yes, then you are ready. So the next thing you're gonna do is this lever here lifts the foot. You're gonna make sure that the foot is in its up position, okay? That allows you to fit fabric underneath the foot. And remember I told you about that 15 line? I'm actually gonna line the inside edge of my fabric up with that. Then I'm gonna grab my wheel, always rolling toward me, never away, and drop my needle into my fabric, okay? Then the very last thing you have to do is you have to put your car in gear. You have to put this foot down, and that's basically like taking your car out of neutral and putting it in drive. If you don't remember this step, you will make a big tangled mess. So my fabric is in, my needle's dropped, my foot is down, all is well. All I need to do now is step on my pedal and keep my fabric lined up with my 15, and I'm gonna make a perfectly straight seam right like that. Okay, now that I have fabric in here, I can show you what some of these stitches do. So we're still on 13, which is our straight stitch, but we've got it on this 2.5 length. If I go down between 0 and 1, so let's go way down here to the bottom, and I stitch, look how tiny it's gonna make these stitches. Now, what are these tiny stitches good for? Very, very fine, very sheer fabrics need smaller stitches. So you can see the difference in the stitch length from there to those little tiny babies. And then we're gonna go the other way and put it all the way up to 4, and I'm gonna stitch. And this gives me long, long stitches. See that long loopy stitches? We call these basting stitches. Now, you never want to hold something together permanently with basting stitches. What they're good for is they're kind of like tape. They hold things together until you can come back and do the real stitching. So they're kind of temporary stitches, okay? All right, now when you finish sewing a seam, for whatever reason, it's always best practice before you do anything else to roll your wheel so your needle is in its highest position, then lift your foot, then pull your fabric out into the left, and there's a handy little stitch cutter right there, thread cutter, okay? So that is our first line of stitching we have done. So now it's time to talk about some of these other stitches that I showed you up here and also up here and what they all do. So stitch number 1, we're not going to do all of them, but stitch number 1 is your buttonhole. That's a little more advanced. Let's wait on that. Stitch so BH is buttonhole, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which are kind of cool patterns. They're decorative, not necessarily important. The next one I really want to show you that's the second most common after straight stitch is our zigzag, and that's number 12, so it's right beside that. Now, before I change stitches, I always want to make sure that my needle's in its highest position, because once I start turning this, you can see that sometimes this needle will jump side to side. We don't want it to do that down the foot because it might break it. So if I'm going to turn this to 12, there, it's jumping for you. So I want to put this on stitch number 12, which is my zigzag stitch. And a zigzag stitch is basically the stitch used to make buttonholes, but it also is good when you have kind of ravelly edges of fabric. You can zigzag right along the edge of the fabric and it will help keep it from raveling. So we're going to start with, we've put it on zigzag, we're going to keep our needle up, and I'm going to do a medium length. So I'm going to do like a 3.5 length, or width, excuse me, and then my length I'm going to keep in the middle. So both of these I'm going to put roughly in the middle, and then I'm going to show you what an average sort of zigzag stitch looks like. So it looks exactly like its name. It zigzags. Okay. Now, what if I wanted the triangle points to be closer together? Then I would take my length and go down. Okay. And as I go down, you're going to see those points get closer together. Okay. Now, what if I want it wider? Then I'm going to change my widths. I'm going to change my width all the way up. Let's go to 6, and let's do all the way almost above 0. And this is going to be very wide, but very close together. So super secure, and can be used for decoration on the edges of things. So you can see that one. Okay, so that's your zigzag and all of its different kind of forms that you can play around with until you get the pattern you like. Now, if you know you're going to use zigzagging, then maybe take a scrap and practice and try and make sure you've got it the way you want it to look before you commit to putting it on your final piece.